Hey guys, it's Michaela and you're watching FunsizedStyle. So if you do not follow me on Instagram or Twitter, you are probably like, it is dang time that you filmed this video, and I could not agree more. If you're new here, I have osteogenesis imperfecta type 3, and I recently underwent a life-saving spinal fusion surgery. This was truly life-saving. For most people, a spinal fusion surgery isn't considered life-saving, but for me it was, and I've done dozens of videos about this journey from beginning to end on my channel, so I encourage you to watch this, or watch those videos. And I was turned away by many surgeons and told that due to my severe circumstances, I would be put on a trach after the surgery permanently, that I would need most likely go into respiratory failure during the surgery because of my lung capacity, the other respiratory conditions I have. My team truly did the impossible, and I took a lot of risks by agreeing to do this, but not doing this would mean that my spine would eventually crush my organs and I would need a tracheostomy anyways, and I also put myself at greater risk for cardiac arrest. And other than like a minor heart condition, my heart is perfectly healthy, and I'm very young to have these issues, but when you have severe osteogenesis imperfecta, scoliosis can be extremely life-threatening if left unaddressed, and many people in my situation, it is too late for them and they can't have a spinal fusion anymore or at all. I waited a lot longer than doctors say that I should have to have this. Well, not my doctor, this was a decision many years in the making when I was consulting other surgeons, because when you make a decision that could honestly alter your life forever, you want to get multiple opinions no matter what. And that's kind of the quick history of what I went through. If you're new here, this was truly a miraculous outcome, and I'm here to make this video today to tell you how it went. I want to first start off by finishing my last statement of, I don't regret doing it when I did. I don't regret doing it late in life. I believe that God puts us in a situation at a certain time in our life for a certain purpose, and this is when I was meant to go through this, and I still have no regrets about waiting as long as I did go through with this. And there were medical reasons as to why we waited I waited really until it progressed to this point, because again, there were medical reasons, and I did a video on that, so I'll link to that here as well. I want to also say that this will be like a 3 or 4 part series. So my spinal fusion was hours. Again, I'll get into all that, and the goal was actually, they typically send spinal fusion patients home in 3 to 5 days, and medical technology and advancements is amazing. So to think that your spine can be completely altered and you can go home in 3 to 5 days is pretty amazing, especially given my condition. And they have done cases really severe, but mine was pretty much the most severe that they've ever done. But they were still confident that with the right pain management, and as long as if I didn't need a tracheostomy by a miracle, that I could meet that 3 to 5 day threshold. But if I ended up with a trach, that would obviously change everything. So that was kind of our goal, my mindset going into this, of when to expect to go home, and kind of the outcome, and if this happens, then this will happen, and if this happens, this will happen. And so I kind of had some idea in my head, but it really didn't end up going anything like we imagined from a hospital stay standpoint. I ended up being inpatient for 28 days, and it was obviously much longer than any of us could have ever anticipated. It turned into be a wild ride, and because the events were so big and things, there was so much that happened within these 28 days, I'm obviously not going to do a video for every day, but there's just a lot to the outcome of my spinal fusion surgery that I want to talk about. So this video will be the surgery itself, how it went, the morning of, and pre-op and everything. And then the next video that you'll see will be I'll talk about the extubation process, and then the next video, the extubation process, and kind of where I was at once I got extubated, and then kind of where my hospital stay was headed, like how I was doing, and kind of our next steps once I was evaluated, like how I was doing after I was extubated, and then also a pain management standpoint, and then kind of when things started to take a turn. The next video that you'll see, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to separate these, or like how this is going to go, but then the third video that you'll see is going to be, I ended up having a second spinal surgery. The fusion itself was already complete. Again, I'll get into this, but I ended up having a second spinal surgery during that same admission, so before I went home, and then so I'll talk about that and the outcome of that, and then kind of like the homecoming, and so they'll be like, this is the morning of, and then the extubation process, how my hospital stay was going, like pain management, and then the third video will be about the second surgery, and then the fourth video will be kind of the coming home and like how we were managing that, and just all these different things that happened. There was a lot that happened, so that's a little bit of an idea of how this is going to be spaced out. I don't know entirely how, but I know like this is what this video is going to be about, so I want to share that with you. So this video is already going to be extremely long, which is why I'm just sticking to the first part in the spinal fusion success video as like the morning of, and like pre-op, and my thoughts going into this, and then when I learned of how the surgery went. So when I end this video, I'll stop, and I'll still be picturing in mind, I'll still be like intubated as like the story ends, but I obviously eventually get extubated. The other thing I want to say before I go into every detail, I want to make this a several part series because there's so much to this, and so many miracles that happened during that time, and I want to share them all with you, and I want to share every detail of this process, and I want to share everything so that I don't ever forget, and just to give you hope. And my team even described this as a medical miracle. Like, God truly used them to do the impossible, when so many of the top surgeons in the country told me that this successful outcome could not be my reality. And this just goes to show that it's so important to get multiple opinions. It's so important to go to a place that has confident doctors. It's so important to seek multiple opinions and to give you hope that anything is possible. And I also share this story with some survivor guilt, because I know that not everybody with severe scoliosis like mine didn't have the outcome that I did, or may have needed a tracheostomy. And like I said, for most people that undergo a spinal fusion, it's not considered life-saving. I mean, you need, if your spine is like crushing your organs, you need the fusion, but like people that have a spinal fusion, like to improve their quality of life drastically, but it's not like life-saving. But for people with OI type 3, like we have really severe scoliosis. I share this, not to brag about my success, because I know that not everybody has the success, and what I went through and what I overcame was truly nothing short of a miracle, because all the circumstances that I had going into this was the perfect recipe for me to have a tracheostomy, for me to be potentially paralyzed, and to know that I recognize that. And I'm just very grateful. But I also want to share the story, to share that miracles do happen, and my life has been proof over and over, but also this experience is unlike anything I ever thought I'd experience. And this video is already so long, so I'm going to go ahead and get into it. And then after I do all the series videos, I will do a Q&A if there's anything. So keep an eye out for that if there's enough questions. So the morning of December 23rd, 2020 is when I had my spinal fusion surgery. And after 3 months of halo traction and so many challenges, the day had finally come. I mentioned this briefly, I believe, in my first Christmas in the hospital video, but I had to fight tooth and nail to be able to have a support system with me for my surgery on my surgery date. So I live in Michigan, and the COVID restrictions are absolutely insane here. It is out of hand. And back in December, things were still incredibly restricted. We discussed it as a family, and I chose to have my parents stay home, and I would bring some friends with me, because my parents are even at higher risk for COVID than myself because they're older and all these different things. And I knew that I would be in the ICU. There is COVID patients on that floor, and I go to a children's hospital because I've been there so long that for my surgery, some of my care has transitioned into the adult side of the hospital. But whenever I have a surgery, even if it's with an adult doctor, like I have surgery at the pediatric hospital because administering anesthesia is very different when you're not even 50 pounds. The anesthesiologists at the adult hospital are not comfortable performing anesthesia on me because I've been at the pediatric hospital for so long, and they know me and they know what works for me. Again, because I'm so small, I'm not difficult to intubate, surprisingly. Like, I get asked that a lot, like if I have an anesthesiologist that I've never had before. Ask me if I've ever been told I'm difficult to intubate, and I'm not, so that's crazy. That's why I just want to say that as well. I go to a pediatric hospital. So the rules are different for pediatric patients. Pediatric patients are allowed to have 2 support people, and but because I'm an adult at the pediatric hospital, I still fall under the guidelines of the adult restrictions as far as visitors go, or like support system. And so I had to fight tooth and nail because I knew that I was going to be intubated and I would be unable to communicate after waking up. Something should go wrong. I didn't want to be left alone with nobody for me to advocate for. Like, this hospital is amazing and I've had very few issues, but it only takes one to have something go really wrong. And like I said, every person that was involved in my care was like a godsend. And since my admission ended up being so long, I literally only had one bad nurse the whole 28 days, and I would say for 28 days, like, that's pretty good at my standards. That was the first part of the fight, so I dealt with that like the day before, and I was able to get my 2 support systems. So my friends Morgan and Brenda met me there, so my parents dropped me off, and I went in like I was in such a good mood, and I should have known that good things were gonna happen that day because I was in such a good mood, which is weird, I know, but I was just like, I'm gonna experience miracles today, and my team is gonna experience miracles. So usually I have to be there like an hour before, but because this was like such a big surgery, there was more to prep for, I don't know, but like I had to be there like earlier than usual, even when I had to be there. This was at like 5:45, so, and I have friends that like offered to be with you, and like I didn't even ask them. Like, I was struggling to find out or to figure out who to ask because I know that this is like such a big responsibility. They wanted to make sure that I had support people with me, and I was like, well, no, like I'm trying to figure out people, and they stepped up, like they volunteered. And to have friends that are willing to be with you at like your most difficult and most vulnerable time in your life is just incredible. So I said goodbye to my parents and thought I would see them in 3 to 5 days. That wasn't the case. And so we go up to pre-op, and a really cool story. So a few days before my surgery, so my friend Morgan that met up with me, she went to New York with me. You guys might recognize her. And like a few days before I got the date for my surgery, she was like, let me know when your surgery is, because, you know, that was in the chaos of like trying to get this all figured out. And so I said okay, and so I let her know that it was going to be on the 23rd. She was like, oh my gosh, no way. And I was like, yeah, why? Like, what's the big deal about December 23rd? She was like, my boyfriend is doing his anesthesiology residency rotation on the pediatric orthopedic floor that day because he's an anesthesiologist, and he's finishing up his fellowship I don't know, like the step that you're almost done being like an official. Like he does, like he's already does anesthesiology. I don't know what you call it. But anyway, so he was being an anesthesiologist with the pediatric orthopedic that week. And this is just yet another example of like how God uses people and like make sure that like you have the right people in your life at the right time. One of my very best friends, like her boyfriend made sure that like he was gonna be on my case that day. I had the best team. My best friend Morgan, her boyfriend was my anesthesiologist, and I just think that that is just so cool. And it was really cool because so many people on my team that like I personally knew. So I told you guys part of the scheduling conflict of rescheduling the surgery sooner when I had all those pins that started to fall out. The part of the scheduling conflict was my surgeon wanted all these specific people on my case, like all these specific anesthesiologists, and I had more than one anesthesiologist. So my friend Morgan's boyfriend, his name is Eric, and then I had one that I've had for many surgeries. I do not remember his name, and I feel so bad because I've had him a bunch of times and I'm usually decent about remembering names. So he was my cardiac anesthesiologist. There was a lot that made the surgery specifically risky for me, as I've mentioned over and over. The biggest risks that we were taking obviously is the amount of time that I would be under anesthesia and the effect that that could have on my heart and lungs. This was my 26th surgery, so I've never had issues while in surgery. I've never had issues with anesthesia, anything we've ever done, anything that I've ever undergone. And so there were all these specific, like, top people that my surgeon wanted, that, like, just the most skilled, most experienced, and every anesthesiologist and nurse and tech and all these different people that deal with the most high-risk patients. So there was nobody on my team that day that was, like, newer to the OR, I'll say that. Like, they were all, like, I had all the most experienced people, which was absolutely amazing. People that God placed that day, it's just, like, puts me in awe. Like, what are the odds that one of my very best friends, like, her boyfriend is my anesthesiologist, and he was gonna be such a huge part in taking care of me and making sure that, like, I literally made it out of the surgery, like, alive. And I mean, that's not like a what are the odds thing. Like, that's a God thing. Like, the fact that I knew so many of these people personally that were gonna be in the room that day was, like, really cool. Really cool. Also, I forgot to mention, to be there at like 6 o'clock or 5:45 or something, and so we had to leave the house at like 3:30, 4 o'clock or something. No, we had to leave the house at like 4:30, I think. Yeah, 4:30. So we got up at 3, and I only got 20 minutes of sleep that night, like, or that morning. Like, I literally fell asleep for like 20 minutes around like 2:30. I was like so hyped up. Like, I was nervous but also just like excited, like in a weird sort of way. Like, this moment that I've been waiting years for, that I knew that, like, God was preparing me mentally and physically for years for, was finally here. And I knew that, like, I was gonna experience miracles that day. And I don't know, obviously, like, we didn't know what was gonna happen, and I know that God is good, and I know that everything good comes from him, but you know, like, you don't know his plan. Like, we don't know his plan for us, and, like, what those things mean. And just because we're his children doesn't mean we're gonna experience perfect tons of things all the time. Like, that's not the case, and something really bad could have happened and would have had to grapple with that. But I don't know, just something inside of me told me, like, I knew that he wasn't gonna carry me through those 14 weeks of traction only to stop there. Like, I knew he would carry me through the next few parts of the actual surgery day that I'm gonna tell you. Like, give me goosebumps, because, like I said, I knew it was gonna be good, but nothing could have prepared me, like, for the incredibly miraculous outcome and everything that happened that day. Yeah, I got up at 3, I still, like, hyped. Like, I was not even tired. I was, like, on this adrenaline high because I was in this, like, shock mode of, like, I can't believe this day is here, and I just could not believe it. Like, so many emotions were going through my mind. Like, my heart was, like, beating so fast. I was so excited. I was so scared. I was nervous. I was so faith-filled, but I was so excited to have this done. Like, no matter the outcome, I knew that after today, or after that day, that it was going to be over. Like, the worst of it was going to be over, or so I thought. More to come in part 2 or 3 of the series. But I knew, like, the biggest part was going to be over, and it was just, it's been a long 14 weeks at that time, and I put so much energy into this. Whatever, I already went into all that. So, got up, packed the rest of my stuff, and we left, and I was jamming to my Christian music playlist the whole way there. Just filling myself with truth and hope, and, like, music really helps me with these times in my life. Like, I'm always listening to music, and it just really helps me in those times in my life, especially like truth-filled music. I said goodbye to my parents, and then obviously we got there and I told you like who my anesthesiologist was, and it was really interesting because, so I told you guys I go to a pediatric hospital, and when I had my Halo place I was still 21, so I still fit the, like I was still considered a pediatric patient because this hospital considers you a pediatric patient until you're 21, and then when you're 22 you're no longer considered a pediatric patient. When I went to have my back surgery, there's like a certain wing for the pre-op adults, so they do like other adults on the ped side or at the hospital because of like the other patients in my situation. And there's just all kinds of unique situations, right? So that was my first time at this wing, at the adult wing. It was still at the pediatric hospital, same floor that I always go to, but it was just the adult wing at the hospital. So I had like different nurses than I'm used to. I think I did have one I normally have. It just all started to hit me like when Morgan put me on the bed, like sit down and like get ready to be prepped to go, like that my whole life was gonna change either way. Like this was gonna be a life-changing experience. And the most difficult part of filming these videos for me is to really just use the right words to describe this experience, because it was so moving, and just all the moving parts and all the things that happened that day, and just the way God aligned everything. Like, you literally had to be there. And I know you guys saw my Halo traction surgery video, so they gave me footage of that, like to post. That was part of our agreement. They wanted to share my story of this miraculous endeavor, and because of all the chaos of needing my surgery moved up, and it was so incredibly close to Christmas, they weren't there to film the spinal fusion day, and that is something that I will be so bummed about for the rest of my life, because of what I'm gonna tell you is something I'm so scared of forgetting. And I know I won't. I just don't ever want to forget it. Like, I have footage of Halo traction, and I so badly want footage of that day, and I just, like, I only have like 4 or 5 pictures of the actual day, and I regret that so much. It was truly one of the most important, pivotal days of my life, and so much happened that day that I can't wait to continue to tell you guys. And I just really wish that they would have captured that on camera, and I'm just so bummed that like that biggest part, like they weren't able to be there. And I don't have a lot of regrets in my life, but that's the biggest regrets of my life, and I just wish that I would have footage on that day back on, just like my Halo surgery, but I don't, and I'll just have to live with that. But it's like nobody's fault, it's just like the circumstances. Okay, so I'm filming something with them, finish off that story, and like they're gonna publish it and everything. But so you won't see, that's why you won't see footage of that day, but you'll see footage of something else. It's a long story, there's a lot to this story of this spinal fusion journey isn't over. She sets me on the bed and I get prepped, and I'm seeing all these people and like recognizing these people that deal with like very high risk patients like myself, and I was just like in awe of how God placed all the best people in my life for this day, and all the best experienced people. And it was really weird for me because I realized how much was at stake. Like, at this point I was like minutes away from going into the OR. Like, we did all the typical pre-op stuff. It actually moved really quickly this time. I don't know, like it just seemed to move pretty quickly. We get prepped and they do like all the typical stuff for pre-op. The only thing that was different this time was like just a lot more of like going over the extensive list of risks. Obviously they always go over that with you when you have surgery, but this again was like unlike anything, and we were prepared. We were hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. And I don't mean to sound like a doomsayer, but from a medical standpoint, like I gotta figure out what video I want to fit this in. But when I went back, like one night I had posted an Instagram post just kind of like reflecting on the experience, and I went through and looked back at like previous medical notes that were written, because you can like view all this stuff now on your patient portal, whatever. These notes are like really give you guys an idea of like what a big undertaking this was. And so I meet with this, and even though I knew everything that I was taking a risk for, I have to sign papers to agree to the things that I had to agree to that could happen. It's just a thing that I hope nobody ever has to do. And I know that that's not a reality. I know that there's going to be people that have to undergo this someday. I know that God is good, but I didn't know what his plan was for me, but I knew no matter the outcome, if I had a trach, I knew that life was still worth living. I have friends that have trachs and live amazing lives and do amazing things, and it would just be a huge lifestyle shift for me, but I would have to grapple with the fact that that would be my new life. A whole lot of other things that I had to consent to that could go wrong, and or potential outcomes. And I know they have to tell you the worst case scenario, liability, all that stuff. I get it, but for me, these risks were high. These were more of a reality than telling you the worst case scenario. These were real possibilities for me. They're real possibilities for anybody. That's why they're listed as a risk, but they were more real possibilities for me than the average patient. And that's what made it so real. So that was really hard. And it was weird because we had so many, dozens of conversations about this, but just sitting on the bed and just minutes away from facing those risks, from being literally like running towards it, like facing them head on, is like a whole different ball game. It really puts into perspective what I had prepared myself for the past 3 months, and the time was here. It was now. It was happening. This was no longer just a conversation. We were doing this right now, and the biggest day of my life was in front of me. This next part that I'm going to tell you, that I wish I had footage. It's the part that I will never forget. So I'm about to go into the operating room. We do all the prep, and and my friend, so I had my friend Brenda and Morgan, and then my friend Kelly also came. She works in the OR, but she wasn't on my case that day, but she made sure to come see me, and it was 2 days before Christmas, so both my friends Morgan and Kelly brought me gifts, and it was just so kind and sweet, and I just felt, again, so loved, and they were just the greatest. And so they gave me gifts. Like, Kelly came and like gave me gifts and stayed with until I was rolled into the operating room. We started like right at I went in at like 7:15. Like, I ended up going in a little early because pre-op just went smooth, and since I was my team's only case, we were like, might as well get started. That was my team's only case for the whole day. About 15 minutes probably before that is when I finally saw my surgeon. But there was just a different vibe in the room. I haven't told a lot of people this. There's just a different vibe in the room than my typical surgeries, and because I think we all just knew the stakes were really high and what a big risk this was, and all the things that could go wrong given my circumstances and the fact that they were doing what was deemed impossible. And they cared for me a lot, and so I think they would just be absolutely broken if I would be needing a trach or become paralyzed or have something go wrong. They're very skilled, but obviously these are risks. That's why they're listed as a risk anytime you deal with the spinal. And then my respiratory, that was our biggest thing. My respiratory system is not the greatest. I knew there was a possibility that I could never the trach, but hearing her say it again on the day of was just too hard. And she knew my parents weren't gonna be there. My friend Brenda knew that my parents wanted to talk to me when she got there, when my surgeon got there. And so I called them and had them on speakerphone. I did not want a video call. To hear my surgeon say, my parents, even though these are things we did, it's not like we knew all these things, but to hear them and be seconds away from facing them head on, it's just, I called her and actually Brenda called her, and because I had my phone on, because I was like minutes away from going into the OR at this point, and I knew I wasn't going to be on my phone the rest of the day because I was going to be intubated. One of the things that we talked about in pre-op was that I was going to be intubated the whole night. Would not come off the ventilator through the whole night just to give my lungs a rest, because we didn't know if even during the surgery, again, if I would go into respiratory failure. We were all kind of prepared for that by the chance we got a miracle, which we did. But by the chance we got the miracle that I would be able to come off the vent, they still didn't want to pull it that day because I was going to be under anesthesia for like 10, 11 hours. We didn't want my lungs to like endure all that and then be pulled off the vent. We wanted my lungs to be rested and strong before they test to see if they could pull the vent. To hear my surgeon, who I care about a lot, and she cares about me a lot, to my parents our hope is that Michaela can come off the ventilator. It wasn't Michaela like will come off the ventilator. It was, we're gonna do everything we can to set Michaela up for the possibility of coming off the ventilator. I hear her remind my parents that Michaela may not be able to come off the ventilator after this. I think the 3 months and years of this conversation just bubbled up inside of me, and I just, even though I knew all this, that's the thing, I knew all of this, but to hear her say that to my parents, like I can't imagine, even though my parents knew, how difficult that was for them to hear her say that Michaela may never come off the ventilator after today was one of the worst moments of my life. But I was still filled with so much hope. I was like, I'm determined to come off the vent. But they knew from a medical standpoint the reality of the state that I was in. So just to, again, to hear her say, to hear her remind my parents that I may never come off the ventilator after today. Morgan and Brenda were there holding my hand as my surgeon had this conversation with my parents. Again, these were not things that were brought up to us for the first time. We had dozens of conversations, but it was just that like reality check. I told you guys in a Halo Happenings video that I got to request Jenna for my spinal fusion surgery as my OR nurse again, and so she was there. That was just an amazing moment to have her there during the biggest day of my life, and to see this just kind of come full circle, like 3 months later, and we're getting ready to do this again. So I was so grateful to have her there. I told my parents, I love you. We hung up the phone, and I went to the operating room, and my friend Morgan and Brenda gave me hugs goodbye, and Kelly, and were cheering me on. And well, first, before, like, as they were having that conversation with my surgeon, my parents on the phone, they were on speaker, and Brenda just held my hand. I just like cried because I was so scared. I had never been so scared in my life. And so we go into the operating room, and the time was now, and this was happening, and to go into such a big situation that you don't know the outcome of, terrifying. It was either going to be really good or really bad. There's no in between. I go in, and I just remember seeing all of this equipment. Like, this OR room was more full of equipment than I'd ever seen in my life. And I'd had like 25, this was my 26th surgery, and so again, it was just another reality check of what was about to happen. So one of the concerns was that I may not be able to be connected to traction during the spinal fusion surgery, and the reason that they typically keep you connected to traction during the surgery is because, like, that's also the other purpose of traction, is because it gives the surgeons more room to operate, because I'm completely stretched out as far as my spine will allow during the surgery, and it makes it easier and safer on me and easier for my surgeon to operate. So one of our concerns was that due to the little pins that I had left, would we be able to connect to traction for the surgery, because had we not, that would have just made the risks even higher. I was able to be connected to traction during the surgery. Obviously found that out after the surgery because we didn't know until later. Also that morning I like consented to all of like needing blood product, which we were certain I would need, and then also so my hospital and my surgeon specifically does research on osteogenesis imperfecta to find better therapies and treatments and surgeries and just better things to treat OI, and they do this obviously with research, and so there was a possibility that they would need to take bone out of me, and so my surgeon asked if I would consent to research. Like, they obviously don't take a bone that they don't need to take. They don't just take a piece of bone for research for their own good. Like, they only use the bone that's taken out if it needs to be taken out, and so I always say yes to that. Like, because I don't do like bisphosphonate therapy, I don't agree with that, and so any other way that I can help in research, I try. And so I did that as well. And I goes with me and like the whole team, and I give Morgan and Brenda and Kelly hugs goodbye. They cheered me on to have friends that like are willing to be you at your rock bottom worst that I was. That moment is like such a gift. And like, I didn't used to have those people in my life, and so that was like a huge gift to have. And so we go in the OR, and that's when again see all this equipment and like all these people. Like, this OR room was full, and I knew that it was going to be more full than usual, but it was a lot more full. I was a mess. I was an emotional mess, and I just remember feeling like this sense of panic before they were gonna let me out. They hadn't even like the IV was in, but they hadn't put anything in there. Like, we just got in the operating room, like still prepping. And I just look around and I see the stuff for a trach. Not like intubation, like a trach if need be. And I just see all of that, and it's like life flashes before your eyes. I'll never be able to explain what I felt. If you can tell, I'm having a hard time finding the right words for things right now. Because this is just the day of surgery is the most difficult for me to articulate. So I feel a sense of panic, and we're getting ready to like start anesthesia, and I just feel a sense of panic, and I was like thinking to myself, like, I need to pray, and I'm gonna ask every single one of these people in this room to pray with. And I know that prayer is not everybody's thing, and I wanted to respect them, but I wanted to ask. And I've never done anything like this before. The vibe in that OR room, like, everybody was so kind and so amazing. Like, I had best team ever. I could not have asked anybody better in that room. But I knew that as soon as I closed my eyes that I didn't know when I would wake up. And so I felt this sense of panic. And I just remember God, like, it was in my heart, like, pray with me. I was like so nervous to say something. I've never asked a group of strangers to pray with me. Like, a lot of these people were not strangers. Like Jenna, Eric, my surgeon, anesthesiologist I know them with. They're not strangers to me, but like, not everybody believes in Jesus, and God gives us that free will, and I didn't want to feel like I was forcing it on anybody, and I didn't know the reaction that I would get. But they were getting ready, and they were doing their checks. Like, if you've never had surgery, they say like, I'm Sam from anesthesia, I'm Sarah, tech. Like, they'll say their name and like what their role is in the OR. So they did that, and then they asked me about like if I was okay, or like how I was doing, because I think they saw that I was like emotional probably. And this is where I wish I had video footage. I want the world to see this so bad, and I hate that I don't have footage of this. It was the most powerful moment of my life. Jenna's holding my hands and anything you need, and I like, what can we do to help you? Because they knew I was all terrified for my life. I never felt this boldness. I just said before we get started, I just wanted to ask. So this is what I said. I said, I know that this isn't everybody's thing. I'm really scared, and I'm really scared, and I was wondering if you would all like to pray for me, or pray with me as I lead prayer, if I say a prayer. And like I said, I never asked a group of strangers if they would pray with. Like I said, about 5 or 6 of these people in the room were not strangers to me, but like, we've never prayed together. Like, I don't even know if they believe in Jesus or they know Jesus. I never felt anything like this, and I never did anything like this. I never prayed with my healthcare heroes. Like, these people were about to save my life. Like, we were seconds away at this point from starting this process and doing what so many deemed impossible. And so I just asked, like, will you pray? Like, will you listen if I lead prayer? I said, if this isn't your thing, like, you can feel free to step out. For those that are interested, I was wondering if I could say it. The consensus was a unanimous yes, and I couldn't believe it, and nobody stepped out of the room. And so I said, like, thank you, God, I just wanted to say thank you for giving me these people to save my life. Like, I still remember every word of the prayer, and I couldn't say it without tears in my eyes. But I knew God understood me, and they could understand me. Like, I was speaking clearly, but I was just like crying through it. I just remember saying, like, thank you for giving me these people that are going to save my life today, and that have dedicated their day to saving my life. And I'm really scared. I have faith in my team, but I just know I don't know that. I just pray that you give them wisdom, and you give them the strength to get through today and make all the right decisions. And I just want you to know how grateful I am for every single person in this room, and praising and praying him. And I said a bunch of other things similar to that, and I just kept thanking him for the people in the room, and there was not a dry eye in the room. And the opportunity to pray with my healthcare heroes I did not expect that part of the journey. That was something that God put on my heart. And I don't usually have the boldness to ask anybody that, or anything like that. And I did it, and it was the most powerful moment of my life to be able to pray with my healthcare heroes. And after that prayer, there was Donna Dry in the OR. So Jenna held my hands like even before it started because she knew I was like a wreck. And then there was another nurse, like when I like originally asked like if I could say a prayer. There was like this other nurse in particular that was like, I'm sure she was Christian because she was like, absolutely, like she was like all about it. She like came right over to my bed. It was so cute. But yeah, it was unanimous, yes. And just the silence in the room as they just let me use my voice to praise him and thank him for them. And there was not a try in the OR, and that is just something I wish we would have kept on camera because I think that could have helped a lot of people. And it was a moment I will never forget until the day I die. Like I've experienced a lot of powerful moments, but I've literally never experienced anything that powerful. Like never in my life. And I just needed that to like give me a sense of peace. And after that prayer, like I felt a sense of peace, and I knew after that prayer, like I literally did all that I could to make this a success. I literally did everything I could, and there was nothing more that I could do. We started, and people were like talking to me and like cheering me on, like right till the minute my eyes were closed. And like, Michaela, like we're here for you. It's gonna be a great day, and we're here for you, and we're with you, and we're all here for you today. And obviously, I'm sleeping at this point, so now we're gonna jump to what I was told after the surgery. So I didn't also mention in pre-op they talked about me being, because we were certain that there was such a higher possibility that I would have to stay on the vent and come off of it. Typically keep somebody like me with my conditions intubated for 2 nights instead of 1, but it obviously would depend how I did throughout the night and everything. So I woke up and I knew I was going to be intubated, so like waking up intubated was not scary because I knew it was, and I had H1N1, and so I'd been awake while intubated before, so I knew like what it was like. About 10 or 11 hours later, I woke up and I was given a whiteboard with a Sharpie, like once they realized that I was awake, and they knew everything had went well. But I just remember like trying to move my body for the first time. Like obviously I couldn't move because I just had my back cracked open. Move my hands and my legs and my arms because I wanted to see like what moved. See if I was like paralyzed or could feel anything. And I just remember that moment of like realizing that I wasn't paralyzed. I felt my neck to see if I had a trach, and no trach was there. And I'm all drugged up and just woke up and like felt this immense joy, even though I was like so physically exhausted. I couldn't even express the joy that I felt because I was intubated, so I couldn't communicate. I remember the first thing I wrote on my whiteboard, how did the surgery go? Even though I kind of already knew, like it doesn't mean something like minor went wrong, didn't go wrong like during the surgery. So it just meant that I wasn't paralyzed and didn't have the trach. So I knew I didn't have the worst case scenario, but like I wanted to know, were they able to place hardware? Like did the hardware hold? All these things. I was in ICU, the PICU, right? Pediatric ICU, intensive care unit, and all these, like the minute you wake up and like start to wake up, all these people surround you, so you know that you're not alone. The first people I saw was my friend Emily from camp. Like she was assigned to me, and that was like another God thing. At the hospital, like I know so many people, and the fact that like he made sure all these people were there that day, it just gets me every time. One of the first people that I saw was Emily, and to see like a familiar face when I had to be alone, because the other thing was they wouldn't let Brenda or Morgan back up on the floor and pick you. Like they did for a second while Brenda brought my wheelchair, but then they made, like when I woke up I was alone. I was really ticked about because that's why I had him come in the first place. So there was a bunch of people in the room once I started waking up to make sure like my pain was managed and everything. And she was like, hey Michaela, and I remember writing on the board, Emily, like with a big smiley face and like, or like a heart or something. And I was like, I wrote like, it's so good to see you or something, like thank you for being here or something. And then my other nurse was like, oh my gosh, like do you guys know each other? Like how do you know each other? And then Emily, because I couldn't speak, was telling my other nurse about camp, and that's how like we met, and we've known each other for like 11 years. A lot of what I'll tell you about the surgery itself went will be in the next video, because the next day is when my surgeon came and told me how it went. The night was pretty rough. I was like writing down, like I was writing a bunch of questions, like asking how like the surgery went and everything, and like these smiles on their faces, because I'm sure like they were informed of the condition that like we expected me to come up to the floor in, but obviously like that didn't happen. I came in great condition, and like I want you to understand, like when I say that we expected these things to happen, it wasn't because of anyone's lack of skill or knowledge. It was because of the poor physical condition that my body was in, because typically when you do this kind of surgery, body like mine wouldn't be able to undergo something like that without these things being a high possibility of happening. And that's on my body's part. Like obviously it's not my fault. Like that's just how my body is, and I'm not saying that these things were a high risk because of lack of skill, because that was not the case at all. Like I have some of the country's best surgeons in my hands, and so yeah, that was not the case at all. I will say this in this video though, so I didn't see like my friends that came till the next day, because even though I requested them to be with me, I woke up in case like something went wrong, like making sure I had the right medicines and everything, and like my list of allergies is like incredibly long, and the reactions that I get to these medicines are like pretty severe. I don't want to be accidentally given one of these medicines, no, or like be able to communicate. They were being, I guess when my friends went up to the floor to like get to me, they wouldn't allow them to me, and like I couldn't communicate for myself because I was intubated. At this point I woke up and like, because I remember the next day when my friend Brenda came, she was like, yeah, I came up and brought your wheelchair at like, I think it was 5, because I was in surgery for 10 hours. No, yeah, 10 hours. She had brought my wheelchair up to the PICU at like 5, and I was still like out. I remember like it was all dark in my room and when I woke up, and so I think I woke up like, I didn't wake up till late in the night. But anyways, that's for the next day story. Like the next section of this video or series. Still like the day of surgery. I knew it was going to be painful, but like, holy smokes. Pain is also going to be another aspect of like the next video that it's really going to take up a lot, because we had an interesting complication with pain management this time that we've never had with any of my other surgeries. I'll get to in the next video, because yeah, that goes into the next day. I didn't post up. I was already like in my ICU room, my PICU room. Late in the night, my friends had left. And by the way, my friends, Morgan and Brenda, had like updated my parents all day, so that's how like they got updates, and that was another reason why I wanted a support system, because like how else were my parents gonna get frequent updates? Like obviously my parents had a number they call, but like they'd have to like know when to call and like all these things. It's just easier to have somebody there like on the floor. I wanted to make sure my poor parents got updates, because obviously I was intubated. I can't communicate to anybody. It was a really rough night though. Pain management was like easy. I did not like sleep pretty much the whole night, because once my body had woken up from anesthesia, that meant my lungs were waking, and I had been sedated for, well, like I said, the surgery itself was 10 hours, and then I didn't wake up till like late in the night, so I was like sedated. Like I was sleeping for 14 hours under sedation, I think. Yeah, so my lungs were like full of junk. But once I learned that I didn't go into respiratory failure and didn't have a trach, like I knew that I could like cough and everything, and so I had to be suctioned all night long. Every 2 minutes my partner's like needing to be suctioned, and like they were like, wow, you're really good at like communicating what you need for being intubated, like writing and like doing like certain hand signals. I don't know much sign language, but I don't know sign language, but like certain hand signals, and like they were like, wow, you're really good at communicating for being intubated. And then I wrote on my word, been intubated before, had H1N1 in 2009, signaling to my nurse like literally every 30 seconds like I needed to be suctioned, and because if we left all that stuff in my chest, then I could get pneumonia and stuff. So like you have to get that suctioned out while you're intubated. So they would like suction it, and it was a long night. But I was so relieved that everything went well. But again, I couldn't say anything. I couldn't express any joy because I was so medicated. I was tired. I was so just trying to take it all in that it was over and I made it. And like a freaking miracle happened. Because I knew the surgery was going to be my longest yet. So I was curious, even though like surgery only feels like 2 minutes, if this surgery would feel longer. But it didn't. It still felt like 2 minutes to me. It was a rough night. We suctioned all night. I basically didn't sleep all night because I was suctioned literally all night. I had a good night otherwise, like nothing crazy, no wild blood pressures, no blood pressure tanking. Just had to keep my blood sugar up, like eat, so they just give me like sugar water, whatever that stuff is called. Like no blood pressure issues, which can be common after a fusion. I don't have blood pressure problems, but I guess after a fusion your blood pressure can do weird things. Mine was good. Was so full of joy. The second day though is when the joy really set in. So I'm going to go ahead and end it here. We'll kick off the next day with 7 a.m. being starting the extubation process. When we thought I may be needing to be intubated for 2 nights, I did so well from a respiratory standpoint all night long. Since I was doing so well, they attempted to lower the ventilator settings, and I did well. So they kept me on those lower ventilator settings. They said we are going to attempt to extubate you tomorrow morning, and so that was amazing. So yeah, that's where we're going to go. Leave off. We'll start and I'll explain the extubation process. That night I woke up late in the night. It was, I don't know, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10. I don't know when I woke up. Late in the night is when I realized this was the start of a miracle that I received. A miracle that day, and my team, a miracle. And so this next day is when I'll also tell you everything that my surgeon told me of how it went and what she saw and what my back was like and all these things, because we didn't really know until we got in there, right? So these things. So the next one is going to be a really long video as well. Probably the longest in the series. Extubation day is what you'll hear about next. And I'm so excited to share with you that miraculous day. Yeah, so that was my day of surgery. It was just amazing to see God moving. And I'm so incredibly blessed that I get to share this miracle with you. So that was my day of surgery. And everything went absolutely perfect. And just like as I said, my team witnessed a miracle that day. Just as I said that morning, my team is going to witness a miracle today. And they did. They witnessed a miracle, a medical miracle, on December 23rd, 2020. I successfully came out of an incredibly complex and high-risk spinal fusion surgery. When so many surgeons deemed Mike as impossible, God used my surgeons to do the impossible. And I can't wait to tell you about extubation day. It was a scary day at first for me. Nothing bad happened, but one of the best days of my life that I'm going to tell you about next. But December 23rd was really the best day, knowing I had made it and I was officially on the recovery side of this 3-year conversation. I can't believe I'm telling you about my fusion surgery. Thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for extubation day and what comes next.